Hey everybody, it's Lord Magicus, and I'd like to talk about today's banned and restricted announcement. So I believe this was the first one that they actually announced. They announced the announcement itself, which is really kind of a weird thing, I guess. You know what? Let's talk about that first. So we don't have scheduled announcements anymore. There's no real way to plan around it. They've gotten into this weird scenario where they want to have the flexibility to ban cards whenever they want, but also ban them in some sort of scheduled way, which seem like they're mutually exclusive goals. But I guess their answer to this is that they want to um, announce that they're going to have a ban announcement, basically. But their announcement doesn't say anything about what it is that's going to get banned or whether maybe something's going to get unbanned. So I think all it really serves to do is just create a week of panic buying and selling, and I think that it's probably just introducing way more stress than if they just decided, you know what, we're just gonna have an announcement and just not announce it. I think that would probably make much more sense. Yeah, I understand that they want to be careful about when they announce it to try to schedule around events, and you know what, to some extent that's fine, but there's also events that when you start playing on a high competitive level in Magic, like there are so many events that go on across the world in Magic that you cannot schedule around all of them. So inevitably, somebody is going to have to eat it. They're going to be playing an event later that week, and you're just you're going to end up screwing somebody. So I guess you try to like announce it around the GPs and like the PTQs and stuff like that, but there's only so much you can do, and honestly, the health of the formats need to really come before the events because, like what happened with Hogak, they let Hogak run wild for so long that it ended up just hurting GPs by turning everything into like, okay, are you playing Hogak? Or are you playing some deck where you're trying to beat Hogak? And I don't think anybody's event is going to be fun like that. I think everybody would rather play a format that's not fundamentally broken. So I mean, it sucks that if you find out like a few days before the event that your Hogak deck is not going to be allowed to be played, but at the same time, that's going to improve the probably the attendance and the experience of everyone who's not going to play Hogak at that event. So I think it's better for the format that way. So I don't know. My personal opinion is that announcing the announcement is just not a good idea. I think they should just announce things whenever they feel it necessary. I don't know. Maybe you can tell me if you disagree with that, but and the other thing is I don't see why they can't just have regular like check-ins. Like they can still keep the like every 3 months. We're gonna have like a mini kind of this is where we're at with each format, even if they're not gonna ban or unban anything there. I don't think there's anything wrong with emergency banning cards. Like that's if it's gonna improve gameplay for people, they should just do it. But this weird we're going to announce that something's getting announced, but we're not even going to tell you what formats. That's kind of strange. Who does that even help? That just people who want to speculate and just try to sell off cards before something gets banned. Like if I was sitting on a set of, like a bunch of Once Upon a Time, so when they announced this announcement last week, then yeah, I probably am gonna sell a whole bunch of them, and try to get as much out of them as I can. But now you're just taking advantage of people who don't understand how this system, quote unquote, works. So I just it seems really strange to me that that's what they would choose to go with. But needless to say, this is where we're at. So let's start looking at this stuff. All right. First thing, Brawl. And I gotta be honest, my first reaction to seeing this, do people still play Brawl? Or not even still, do people play Brawl? Like, I know I don't think I've ever even touched this format, and for the most part, I don't know anybody like in my area that really plays this. I guess it's just like a way to play Commander on Arena for the most part, and maybe that makes sense, but I don't think that this format really exists outside of Arena, so I guess they have to like pay attention to it because they really care about Arena, but like I cannot imagine that most people really gave a shit about this announcement for Brawl. So they banned Golos Tireless Pilgrim, which, you know what, I understand that because this card is ridiculously good in that kind of format. He's got like a kind of Urza ability on him where you just, spend a mana, you spend a whole bunch of mana and you get to play cards for free. So yeah, and I guess, I don't know, it seems like it could have been a problem, twice as popular as the next deck. Sure. You know what, maybe we should actually like keep this in mind. So they say it's not inherently problematic, but they also went out of their way to cite the fact that Golos is the most popular deck and is twice as popular as the next most popular deck. So clearly that matters to them a little bit, but yeah, I guess because it's a 5-color deck and it's a creature they can play for colorless mana just makes it really hard to balance. So, and also it's a problem with lands, which as we're gonna talk about in a few minutes. Lands are one of the hardest things for them to balance now, and there are some reasons why for that. But I guess they're going on this. So here is an example where the lands are the problem, and they admit that because tutoring for a bunch of lands that have like really interesting abilities, but the fact that it can do that, it makes it a problem. So they just banned Golos. Yeah, it's fair. Okay. But yeah, I guess that also the fact that it's a tutor in a singleton format, I understand that to an extent, but it's also like it's supposed to be like a commander type thing. Like tutors are just inherently a part of that, so I don't understand why you would say, yeah, are you going to ban tutors from every other format like that? I don't know. I don't agree with that. Like the fact that stuff, what about Expedition Map? Like, isn't that in Commander, isn't that a problem because it also tutors for whatever lands? But I don't understand. I guess they don't like the fact that like Golos just does everything and lets you play anything that you want in your deck. So you know what, I can kind of understand. But overall, like this was not really something. I don't think anybody really expected this because I don't think anybody really cared about this for the most part. So it's fine. But this card was kind of menacing in Standard for a while with Field of the Dead, so I can understand why it would be a problem in Brawl. So next on our list is Historic. So again, a format that's really only exists for the sole purpose of Arena, and I mean I think it could be interesting if there were historic paper events, but no, this format it's not even like Pioneer Light or anything. It's literally just we need an excuse to like or we need some way for you to be able to use the cards that are just getting Thanos snapped out of your standard collection every year. So here's Historic. Hopefully like that does something for that. And I think Historic could actually be a good format. I'm probably going to start playing a little bit of it once the new Historic pack comes out because Mara Reader is going to be in it. So we have the option to play Merfolk in Historic. And I think that the deck honestly looks like it's probably playable. So I'll give it a try and we'll see if people like it. Then maybe I'll play more of it on here. So, but we will give it a chance once it comes out. So. All right. Well, let's see. Oh yeah, the other thing I found interesting is with Historic, they created a suspension list for Historic, which is definitely totally not like a second ban list the same way that the Exile Zone is the second graveyard. Totally different, promise. Just ignore the fact that it also functionally is a second ban list. If you can ignore that, then it's definitely different. Yeah, I get it perfectly. It makes so much sense to me. So yeah, they suspended 4-card because they didn't want to have to say we're gonna ban Oko in another format. So they decided, you know what, it's suspended, along with Field of the Dead, Veil of Summer, and yeah, Once Upon a Time. So So they decided that, alright, well, now they're going to take more long-term actions on those cards. Oko, Veil of Summer, and Once Upon a Time are now officially banned from Historic. So effectively nothing changes with them except that they're less likely to ever come back into Historic. But they also decided that they're going to unsuspend Field of the Dead. And that seemed like a really interesting choice to me because they just admitted that stuff like Golos being able to find cards like, I don't know, Field of the Dead could be a problem especially with the smaller card pools. So remember, like, Brawl is played with like just standard stuff, and Historic is only barely bigger than just standard. So it's like there's, I guess, what the second smallest like format that's on this list for today. You have stuff that's standard legal cards, and you also have stuff that's now slightly more than standard legal. But now, apparently, Field of the Dead's going to be fine. So their explanation here is kind of interesting. Let's read it. Because of the digital-first nature of Historic and its unique approach to adding card content, our philosophy is, when possible, to introduce answers to problematic cards rather than ban them. Really? Where the fuck was the answer to Oko? Sorry, nope, let's not go there. In the case of Field of the Dead, we're introducing some new answers with Historic Anthology 2, including Ghost Quarter, which this is a card that's a reprint. You know, well, they're both reprints. Like they're adding them to Historic from older formats. But this is a card most people are probably familiar with. And the other card is Goblin Ruin Master, which we'll talk about that in a second. With these new options and other decks picking up powerful additions, we're optimistic that we can reintroduce Field of the Dead without decks that use it becoming dominant. Really? Are you serious? Like, this card is such a beating. Like, okay, so Scapeshift is still illegal in this format, yes? So like, can't you? So Scapeshift is definitely still a huge threat. But didn't you also just put like Knight of the Reliquary into Historic as well? So you have a way to tutor it up and guarantee that you have land drops every turn. And in fact, you can trigger it multiple times a turn, because if you Knight of the Reliquary for stuff like, I don't know, Fabled Passage, then you can get 2 triggers off of this each time. And don't you also have the Dryad that's legal in here? Like, are you sure that this was a good idea? Like, Ghost Quarter is obviously a card that can help a little bit against this, but does that mean like every deck is going to have to run Ghost Quarter just to deal with Field of the Dead because this card is so ridiculously awesome? Well, okay, awesome in the sense that it's really strong, not awesome in that it makes fun gameplay. I don't think that it makes fun gameplay, but and it just, I don't know, like, it just seems like such a interesting choice to like just unsuspend this card. Like, it seems like it's caused a problem in almost every other format that it's been in so far, and here you're saying, you know what, Historic with its tiny card pool is going to be the one format where this is definitely going to be not only fine, but like, we're so confident that it's going to be fine that we're going to unsuspend it. Alright. And so this Goblin Ruin Blaster, to be honest, I never even knew that this card existed. Their answer to why Field of the Dead is not going to be a problem is that they have a 4-mana Stone Rain effect that's going to keep it in check. What? How does that even make sense? Like, I can sort of understand how Ghost Quarter is going to deal with this card. Goblin Ruin Blaster? Really? Like, I guess, like, the Goblins deck might play this card, but how many decks are going to be playing this just to deal with Field of the Dead? Like, I don't know. And it still doesn't, it's a one-time thing. Like, and again, you still have stuff like Knight of the Reliquary and Golos where they can just tutor out as many fields as they want. So, I don't know, like, this just seems like such a sketchy reason to be unsuspending this card. Like, it honestly makes me feel that they're unsuspending it just for the sole purpose of showing people that, hey, look, suspension is not the same thing as bans, because we didn't ban every card on the suspend list, we unsuspended one of them. And I guess that's the one that they felt was the least egregious to unsuspend, so that's just such a strange thing to me. But Alright, I guess we're going to see how Field of the Dead affects Historic. Like, they might be optimistic about it. I'm not really optimistic about this card. I would probably be happy just never to see it again. But, I don't know. This is the path that we're going down, so sure, I guess the Field of the Dead is coming back. So, three bans and an unban, essentially, for Historic. Again, though, this isn't really what people were hoping that was going to get announced today. So, I don't think anybody really cared to hear about Brawl or Historic for this ban announcement, and I have an even harder time believing that unsuspending Field of the Dead is the thing that people wanted out of this. So, alright, let's skip down chronologically to the next format. Pioneer. Wait, what? No, there's no Pioneer here. Where the fuck is Pioneer? Wasn't that the format that was like the most on fire out of any of these? Alright, no. So let's go down here to Pioneer first. Yeah, generally we're happy with how the Pioneer metagame has been playing out over the last several weeks. We saw tremendous diversity across the top decks of the 3 Players Tour tournaments in early February. Magic Online data indicates that the matchups between the most popular decks are in a healthy place, with each having both won and lost matchups against the other ones. Are you kidding me? Like, hasn't Inverter just been, like, absolutely crushing top 8s over the last, like, 2 months or something like that? Inverter is such a huge problem. Like, it's ridiculously hard to interact with, and it is, like, itself, like, the best thing to be playing against itself, because, like, blue and black are the strongest cards. Like, you either need to have counter spells or discard spells in order to, like, be able to disrupt them. You can't use removal to stop them, really, and like maybe you have something like, say, I don't know, Hushwing Griff, but like, okay, in that case they still just have like a 6/6 flying creature for 4 mana plus a bunch of control cards. So it's not like they don't run Fatal Push in their deck, that it's, or like they don't. It's not like they don't have stuff like Pack Rat to side into where the Griff isn't really going to do anything. I don't know. It's a card that I guess, it does stop them from comboing with, like, Thassa's Oracle, and it stops Inverter from exiling their deck, but it doesn't seem like it's that hard for them to, to play against. So, across the last 2 weeks of MTGO leagues, they're saying Dimir Inverter has a 45 or 49% non-mirror match win rate and has unfavorable matchups against 5 of the other 10 most played decks. Yeah, but again, wasn't this deck at one point something like 25% of like the most played decks on like day 2s? Like, obviously, okay, so Dimir Inverter is, I think, a lot like Splinter Twin, where it's a very challenging deck to play correctly. Like, 'cause it's not just just a brain dead combo deck. You're not just, or at least you should not just be trying to say, I'm playing, Devoted Druid, and I'm playing Vizier of Remedies, and all of a sudden I have infinite mana, and I just win with that. It's a little bit more involved in that, because you actually like, the deck is a control deck that just has, like, a combo finished into it. So you actually have to you have to be good with your deck in order to, like, really convert those matches. But if you're, like, a decent control player, and the metagame pretty well, and you have a decently constructed, version of the deck, yeah, it's going to do way better in your hands than someone who just picks it up for the first time and has, like, no idea what they're doing in Pioneer. The deck, I think, is very, very clearly, like, the best thing you could be doing in Pioneer, but it also is a deck that, like, its win rate is going to vastly change depending upon whose hands it's in. And I mean, I think that we've seen decks like that before. Stuff like Second Sunrise, or Summer Bloom, or even KCI in Modern. Like, all of those decks were decks where the people who pick them up and are experts with them are going to absolutely just, like, destroy people with them, because they are very powerful, but they also require you to play very, very tight games in order to convert, like, those really early and powerful victories. So, if you're telling me that your basis for this is that Dimir Inverter has a 49% non-mirror match win rate, So I have two problems with that. One, if you're judging this based on MTGO data, there are a lot. I think there are a lot of people that play MTGO and will just pick a deck that the statistics that the limited statistics that we have say this is the best deck. A lot of people will just go and play decks like that, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be good at playing them because some of these decks take more time to learn than others, and it's definitely possible that the reason that this overall percent isn't as high as I think it probably should be, because there might be fewer people that are like actually experts with it playing it, as opposed to like the average person playing it may not be quite as good with it. So yeah, I think that there could be a little bit of that going on, but also I am extremely skeptical of them using a data analysis when Wizards of the Coast has gone out of their way to obscure this kind of data as much as humanly possible. Yeah, that it makes it very hard to trust them when they're saying, "No, don't believe us that it's not too good." You know, we're telling you we have all the data. We won't let you see it, but just take our word for it. It's fine. I don't know. Like that really kind of bothers me, and I don't think that Wizards of the Coast has a lot of goodwill from most of their player base right now in order to kind of make such arguments against. So. And actually, you know what? There is another factor to this that should mention. What was I going to say? Yeah, that 49% non-mirror match win rate. That's when the entire metagame is gunning for this deck because it is by far it is very, very clearly the best deck to be playing because it's like one of the hardest to interact with. So if you're telling me that it's maintaining almost a 50% win rate across the entire format when everybody is warping their entire metagame, all their decks, not only the choice of deck and the individual cards in their deck, stuff like Hushwing Grift and Gideon of the Trials or Gideon's Intervention, having to jam those kind of cards in your deck just to have a chance against this thing, I don't know, I would hope that it would have a lower win rate when there is that much targeted hate against it. So the fact that it has warped the meta this much and has still held as much ground as it has should also kind of say a lot about why the card is a problem. Now they say that the win rate has been drifting down since the Players' Tours, but that's also because the metagame has warped so incredibly hard against it. Yeah, I mean, it should drift down, but it should also be a lot lower than that, given how many people are gunning against it. The Lotus Breach decks are at an even lower win rate, which, yeah, that makes sense. Lotus Breach is a little bit easier to hate against, but in some regards, because every single deck has access to Damping Sphere, which is, one of the better cards against it. And there's also stuff like Rest in Peace, which help against the deck as well. I don't know. I think that Lotus, I don't want to see the Lotus Field get banned, but Underworld Breach might be a little bit too much. I think that deck was fine when it was just the Twiddle version, but I would keep my eye on Breach for sure. I mean, I don't think that Breach is any better than the Dimir Inverter deck, but I think it's not far behind it. So if you ban Inverter, that deck certainly seems like it could be somewhat similar to Dredge and Modern actually, where the deck is really powerful and it taxes your sideboard because now it's okay, if Lotus Breach becomes the best deck, well, you know what? You just everybody has a 12-card sideboard because now you have to dedicate 3 cards in your deck just to that. So you have your 75 starts with exactly 3 Damping Spheres in the sideboard, and I don't think that's good for the metagame. For okay, you're gonna say there's this one card that's really good against it, but is that what we want Pioneer to be? Like a 72 card format? I don't know. That doesn't seem ideal to me. So, I mean, I sort of understand why Breach has kind of dodged the bullet here, but at the same time, I think you can make a very good argument that it probably shouldn't. I would leave the Lotus Field alone because I think the Twiddle version is still okay, but I don't know, the Underworld Breach version just seems like, I don't know, like I think that's probably still too much, but I mean, if we can't ban like Inverter, like how the hell are we even supposed to have that the breach conversation? um, Interestingly, they also talk about the Heliod Ballista combo have yet to prove themselves consistently in competitive tournaments and aren't showing up at any play rates we consider problematic. Well, maybe that's because fucking Dimir Inverter is the deck that everybody has to hate against right now, and Heliod Ballista just isn't quite as good versus this because it's a control deck that just plays like a ton of discard and counter spells and removal. Yeah, so I can see exactly why, the presence of decks like Inverter are going to, suppress things like Heliod Ballista. And take away Inverter and maybe take away Breach, and I'm sure Heliod Ballista is going to show up a lot stronger than it is now. So it's definitely something I think you should have your eye on. Just because it's not a problem now doesn't mean it's not going to be a problem. It's just, how do we say, if you're not going to put out the Raging Inferno like that is Dimir Inverter, like how can we even have discussions about anything else? Like the format can't even begin to like unwarp itself at this point. So and until until it starts to like unwind a little bit, we can't see what other problems might exist in it. So the fact that they're not changing anything in Pioneer, like, it just fucking blows my mind. All right, I have no idea what kind of crack that they're smoking, but it's insane. Splinter Twin got banned from Modern for way, way less than what Dimir Inverter has been doing to this format since its inception. And to be honest, like, the deck is still, not terribly old, so it still has time to adapt and still make itself even stronger. So, yeah, I don't understand it. We don't have standards for, what constitutes being acceptable in Pioneer or not. Like, it kind of looked like maybe when we started off Pioneer, when they decided that, Felidar Guardian had to go, that they were kind of thinking along the lines of, okay, well, maybe this is just supposed to be a format where combo's not supposed to be very strong. So that would make Pioneer different than like Modern and Legacy, where both Modern and Legacy have a lot stronger combo presences. But the difference is both Modern and Legacy also have stronger answers to deal with the combo. Which Legacy has stuff like Force of Will, and at least Modern has like Force of Negation. And there's still other cards that they have, like Relic of Progenitus helps a lot against a lot of those decks, and stuff like Torpor Orb. That Torpor Orb would be great. That would actually be a very good card against Inverter, because it's like a Hushwing Griff that like any other deck that's not playing white could play. But unfortunately, that's like about a year or so too early for the cutoff for Pioneer. So, we don't have answers like that in this format, where stuff like that could help keep these decks in check in Modern. And I mean, Inverter it's like maybe a turn slower than like Twin was. Like, this is a turn 5 or 6 deck, where Twin is normally like a turn 4 deck. But Pioneer itself is also generally like a turn slower than Modern. So it's really kind of the same deal, where Inverter is just naturally good at slowing down the game because of its control cards, and then until it gets to the point where it can just play Inverter, then play Oracle, and just win. So, I mean, I'm surprised they didn't even try going after like Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time, because I would have thought that, you know what, at least one of those, like, you could try to like, surgically to bring it down a little bit without outright killing the deck. But no, they're not even going to do that. They just think that Pioneer is fine right now. It's like they literally said that, we're happy with how the Pioneer metagame has been playing out. Well, I don't think the community is very happy about it. Like, I think the majority of people are pretty upset about the way that Pioneer is going right now. I think a lot of people would just really like to have at least, one kind of non-rotating format that's just not going to be dominated by combo decks. And what's really interesting is, where was it they said? Our philosophy is, when possible, to introduce answers to problematic cards rather than ban them. Yeah, that doesn't really seem to be the case, though, because we just spent the entire last year of Magic the Gathering adding more problem cards to it than we have answers. So, like, if how can you make the argument that you're trying to put answers into to these cards in here, and instead you're literally printing cards that like turn off the answers, like fucking Teferi Time Raveler or Veil of Summer, or like Plague Engineer just outright kills decks. Like, yeah, that like so many things had to die, for that. Like, I guess maybe they saw it and they're like, you know what, this would be good against stuff like Trinity, Nemesis, and Legacy. But at the same time, they didn't care that like it ridiculously hurts things like Death and Taxes or Goblins or Elves. No, that doesn't seem to matter. Like, I don't know. I don't understand the rationale here. It doesn't make sense to me. Or things like Field of the Dead. Like, really? Like, they put that in a standard format with Scape Shift, and then printed Golos in the set right after that. What answer did you put in your standard set for that? And then there was also, like, Oko. Like, yeah, only in Legacy where stuff like, Pyroblast exists can Oko somewhat be contained. In every other format, he's just continued to dominate. And honestly, even in Legacy, like, Oko is just very strong, but I don't know if Oko is too good in Legacy or not. I think that it's probably fine, but it's definitely not generating the kind of games that a lot of people enjoy. So it's just because it's so hard to answer it. Like, a lot of the Planeswalkers are just difficult to answer. Like, Karn, the Great Creator, has been banned in what it was restricted in Vintage, I think, and also caused a ban in Modern because they had to ban Mycosynth Lattice because of it. Like Narset, I think was restricted in Vintage as well because like the card's just dumb. it they're Yeah, instead of printing answers, they just print a bunch of cards that say no, your opponent can't do things. They're literally turning off elements of gameplay instead of and printing cards that like kind of keep the game going. It's just instead of kind of this nice back and forth magic that printing proper answers would generate. Instead, they've spent the last year printing a bunch of cards that are trying to build up snowball magic, where basically you just play a bunch of stuff and things that are powerful and generate card advantage, and also tell you that all right, well now your opponent can't do this thing until your side surges so much that they're not able to recover. Like, as soon as you play Karn against like an affinity deck, like they're done. Like they're not going to be able to come back from that. Or you play like Plague Engineer against like the Elf deck. Like, okay, well you just killed off half their board and they're not going to be able to stick more creatures. So like that just killed off half of their thing. Or you're playing a combo deck and you're playing Teferi, and it's like, okay, well you have to deal with this Teferi like right now, or you lose because then you're not going to be able to use like counter spells or anything to stop me from just winning the game. And it just, I don't know, it seems really weird that they would be okay with this and saying, yeah, that they're happy with how Pioneer is going when they keep adding all these ridiculously hard to interact with things like Thassa's Oracle or, Underworld Breach. But this is the format that has, like, this has, like, the fewest answers compared to, like, Modern and Legacy. It doesn't have, like, all the cards that, like, could potentially keep some of those things in check. So I don't understand why it is that they think that's acceptable, and it kind of pisses me off, to be honest. So I don't know. That's kind of crazy. I think that this is not the last that we've heard about these decks. I think that I think there's going to be enough of an outcry that probably in the near future they're going to have to at least revisit this. And part of the problem too is I think they haven't really. I briefly mentioned this earlier. Like they haven't touched on the fact that they don't have a set of established guidelines for how they want Modern and Pioneer to exist now. They used to have a set of guidelines where they laid out a bunch of rules that said things like, Modern is supposed to be a turn 4 format. You're not supposed to win consistently before turn 4. And They kind of outlined like, okay, this is what we imagine Modern to be. But you know what? Modern's not like that anymore. And in fairness, they did promise that they were going to go back and look at that and revise what their intended format goals are for Modern, but they haven't told us that yet. So it's kind of hard to like know, okay, what's supposed to be acceptable in this format and what's not, because, and of course a lot of people are going to ask for bans when, if the old guidelines are the only thing that we have to go by. Well, there are so many cards that like just totally don't care about those guidelines. Like Infect is very, very easily a turn 3 deck now. Sometimes it can kill you in turn 2 like without much difficulty now, because they have things like Scale Up that just got printed within the last year. Yeah, it's, or what is it, Neo Brand? Like that can kill you before you've even taken a turn. And it's not even that uncommon. It's something like 10% of the time it can just win in turn 1. So, and by like turn 2 or 3, it's like 50%. How the fuck is that okay? Like, if Modern's a turn 4 format, like you're telling me that Neo Brand is okay by that metric? Like, of course people are going to be pissed and they're going to be constantly asking for bans if you don't tell people, all right, well, this is what you should reasonably expect out of this format. And so the fact that they did this ban announcement before they've released those new standards for what they consider to be acceptable for things like Modern honestly surprises me, because it makes it that much harder for them to make the arguments to justify this is why we banned these cards and this is why we didn't ban other cards. I don't know, it just seems strange. And they absolutely have to do that with Pioneer too. There is no getting around that. Pioneer has to have a set of guidelines as to this is what we consider acceptable for Pioneer. And I just don't understand, like, this is the closest thing that we have right now to that set of guidelines, and if they're saying they're happy with what Dimir Inverter has been doing to Pioneer, I don't think that really bodes well for Pioneer, to be honest. I think that they probably need to reevaluate that, because I don't think that a lot of people are going to be terribly pleased with Pioneer being yet another combo-dominated format, except now it's just in a format where there's less ways to deal with it. I don't know. That seems kind of like a interesting decision to me. So, well, all right. Let's move on to Modern, because I think everybody knew that this was coming. Once Upon a Time gets the axe in Modern. That was 100% something that was going to happen. It's why we played our last league with Once Upon a Time, and we went 4-1 with it. So obviously the card did some really good work in Merfolk, but yeah, you know what? That's probably the point at which that's when you know it had to get banned. Same thing with like Oko. When Merfolk is playing this new card in it that's really broken, like, then yeah, I guess you just have to ban it. So I mean, Eldrazi was splashing one forest in their deck to play Once Upon a Time. They're primarily a deck that doesn't make colored mana, and they were playing Once Upon a Time in their deck, so that could not be a good sign for its health. But the most dangerous the most dangerous part of it is that it was being played in the Amulet Titan deck, which actually I don't even know if that's fair to say, because the deck doesn't half the time doesn't even play Amulet of Vigor in it anymore. It's the Primeval Titan ramp deck. Like, Once Upon a Time is super good in that deck, providing a level of consistency that is just absolutely just nut crushing to like every deck that's playing it, but especially to that one, because that deck has such a wide toolbox of cards and it makes so much mana so quickly that it just really it just is utterly busted with this. So banning Once Upon a Time is probably going to take Titan down a peg or two. Probably not two, like maybe like half of a peg, I guess. I don't think that they were super reliant on this card. I think they were just playing it because the card itself is just very good. So, I mean, we were getting to a point where this card was actually more played than Lightning Bolt. And, again, I have to, like, ask this question, like, who the fuck got, like, or who designed this card? They put the words, "You may cast it without paying its mana cost" on it. That is what costs... That's what causes like 99% of the problems in this game. Like, things that you can cast for free are like inherently the single most broken spells that you can play. So the effect of the card is very powerful, because they just changed the mulligan rule over the last year. to in a way that incentivizes mulliganing. And guess what? If this card is kind of like a ley line where it's something that you want in your opening hand, well, you now have a mulligan system that that is encouraging you to like dig for a card like this because it unfucks your mulligans. Especially if you're playing like a linear strategy, like where or you just need like some certain play sequence. Well, okay, I mulled to 5 cards, but once upon a time means that I can guarantee that I have the right 5 cards in order to like just still win the game anyway. So of course it's not surprising that as many decks as humanly possible were jamming this card because like stuff like like Titan and Eldrazi were by far like some of the most powerful decks in the format, specifically because they were able to jam once upon a time. I mean, Neobrand was playing it. Fucking Merfolk was playing this card because it was that good. Now, I don't think Merfolk needs this card in it, but I think this card certainly was very good in our deck. So, I mean, I will be sad to see it go from Modern, but we'll still probably we'll play with it a little bit more in Legacy because I don't think we've seen the last of this yet. Yeah, but just when you're printing cards like this that are 0 mana cards effectively, like of course that's going to be a problem. So I don't understand, like the concept of the card is kind of neat, but at the same time, how have they not learned this lesson about printing 0 mana cards? It's mind-boggling. So it was very obvious that Once Upon a Time had to go from Modern because it was just empowering like all of like the really really good decks in the format for the most part. I think Infect might have even been playing this card too, just because one of like a deck like Infect, one of the best best parts of the deck, they only need to play like 8 creatures in their deck and like 4 lands, and that's their source of Infect damage. But other than that, their entire deck is like pump spells, and they can just play Once Upon a Time now because Once Upon a Time can find things like their Blighted Agent or their Glistener Elf to like get them their really powerful starts. It can find extra lands, like they have the Inkmoth Nexus obviously, but they also have stuff like Pendlehaven. So Once Upon a Time finds them pump spells in the form of Pendlehaven. So even in the late game, it's not a totally dead card. It's just I don't know. It's since they're going to be mulliganing aggressively anyway, like it makes sense to like put a card like this that just like rewards people for mulliganing in it. So now the thing that is most interesting about this is this was the only card they banned in Modern, and I think a lot of people expected they were going to ban more from Modern than just Once Upon a Time, because the Primeval Titan deck has now just become ridiculous with the addition of was it Dryad of Elysian Grove or something? I think that it's something like that. It's like a Prismatic Omen on a stick. So guess what? Titan can now play like 1 Valakut in the deck, and now all of a sudden they have Valakut and Field of the Dead, and they can just play like Titan in it and just get like a bajillion zombies and deal like a bajillion lightning bolts to your face just by playing Titan because it tutors up land. So yeah, that coupled with the Dryad and like the fact that you can find all of these things with Once Upon a Time made it ridiculous. But like you can still just Summoner's Pact for your Titan at any given point, or Summoner's Pact for the Dryad. Like either one works. Yeah, like Titan is kind of doing to lands what Birthing Pod did to creatures. Birthing Pod got banned because it was restricting like the kinds of creatures that Wizards of the Coast wanted to design. They did not want to potentially create more problems for Pod where they can just now any broken creature we print is just going to be tutorable with Birthing Pod. Well, guess what? We're now in the world where any broken land, like Field of the Dead that you print, is going to be tutorable by Primeval Titan, and it's going to come into play by like turn 3 or 4 at the latest. So I'm kind of surprised that they didn't go after Titan a little bit harder than this. I think that it's a problem that's just going to continue to stick around, but again, like what are you gonna do? This seems to be the world that they want to live in for the time being. Modern probably needs to have a couple more cards banned from it. You could make a few arguments for things like Astrolabe, because Astrolabe is undermining Blood Moon, which is one of the cards that normally keeps stuff like the Titan deck or Tron or like Eldrazi Tron in check. All the big mana decks, are normally kept in check by stuff like Blood Moon, but Blood Moon is fucking terrible when half the metagame is running Arkham's Astrolabe. They're just playing snow basics, and Blood Moon does absolutely nothing to them. So instead of being able to keep the metagame from becoming too greedy, now we see even the control decks are now just Bant Snow, where they're playing stuff like Stoneforge Mystic or Uro in their deck, and they're more of a mid-range deck than an actual control deck now. So, and that's entirely due to Arkham's Astrolabe, and their mana base is so it's very hard to disrupt them. So yeah, you can't Blood Moon them out of the game, even though they are a 3-mana deck. I mean, I also saw a deck that was playing Blood Moon in the sideboard of the same of a 4-color deck that was also playing Cryptic Command in the main deck as a 4-of. That doesn't make 4-color deck playing 4 Cryptic Commands and Blood Moon in the sideboard. How is that not a sign that the Astrolabe is a problem? So I don't know if it's as much of a problem in Modern as it is in Legacy, but we'll get to that in a second. But I just want to show, I don't necessarily know that Labe needs to go just yet, but it's certainly a card that a lot of people have things to say about. So I don't know how exactly you fix Modern at the moment. Titan, I think, is still probably going to be definitely high in the tier 1 list. Even without Once Upon a Time, they still have a ton of other cards that can go into that slot. Maybe they'll move back towards an Amulet of Vigor build and just play Ancient Stirrings in the list, because that seems to be a very explosive build for them. Slightly less consistent than Once Upon a Time, but still probably very, very good. We'll have to see. I think that Modern probably, like I said, Modern probably needed more bans than this to try to bring it back into a sane place, but you know what, we're just stuck with that the way it is. So, alright, well, let's get on the last one here. Yeah, Legacy. And Legacy, there was really one ban in particular that everybody thought needed to absolutely happen, and that's the one that we got, Underworld Breach. Underworld Breach is Yawgmoth's Will, except it costs 1 less mana. That's effectively what that card is, and yeah, because of that, it got banned in Legacy. Because it turns out, Lion's Eye Diamond and Brain Freeze do a very, very good imitation of Black Lotus, and when you're playing Underworld Breach in your deck. And it's a Black Lotus that you can just keep playing from your graveyard as many times as you want. So it lets you just mill out your entire deck, and then you can win with whatever win con you want, whether it be Grape Shot or Thassa's Oracle. Anything works. And there were several different versions. There was a Grixis version of Breach. There was a Jeskai version of Breach. I think there were a couple 4-color versions of it. I even saw somebody build a fucking Delver Breach deck. That blows my mind. How do you not think that Underworld Breach is a problem? Yawgmoth's Will is a card that is banned in every format and restricted in Vintage, and somehow printing that as a 2-mana card, that at least Yawgmoth's Will had the decency to say, alright, well, if you're going to cast Black Lotus from your graveyard, the next time that it goes to your graveyard, it gets exiled instead. Breach lets you do it as many times as you want in one turn, as long as you can keep filling up your graveyard, which is obviously not a problem, because there's stuff like Brain Freeze or Grinding Station that you can use to mill out your deck. So, I don't know how the hell it is that they thought this was not going to be a problem. This is just, Yawgmoth's Will, except worse. So, I don't know. This had to absolutely go. I guess the good thing for Legacy is that Lion's Eye Diamond was not the card they targeted, which it could have been. This card is definitely a centerpiece to a lot of the really powerful combo decks in Legacy. So you could certainly make an argument that, Lion's Eye Diamond could have been the card that went, but fortunately they chose to get rid of Breach, which I think is the right choice, because this card is just stupid, and whoever designed this should be ashamed of themselves. Like, I'm sorry, like, you can't print something like this and then not expect that it's not going to, like, cause a problem. Today very easily could have been a day where Underworld Breach got banned in 3 or 4 formats, and I'm surprised that it only got banned in one. This in the same kind of line that we've been going down with stuff like Field of the Dead and Veil of Summer and Oko, which have been banned from numerous formats and continue to keep getting banned from formats. Underworld Breach, I think, is going to follow that same trajectory, where eventually it's going to be banned in like every format. We haven't gotten there in Modern yet. I think Pioneer is probably the next one it's going to leave from, but yeah, the shelf life in this card does not seem terribly high to me. I would be legitimately surprised if it makes it to the end of this year. So, but yeah, this card was absolutely a mistake, and it's definitely had to go. So now the only other thing I would say about Legacy right now, a lot of people are still kind of upset about Astrolabe and Veil of Summer, and there is a very good reason to be upset about that, and that's because Astrolabe and Veil of Summer are undermining like two of the most important cards in Legacy, Wasteland and Force of Will. Astrolabe is letting people play like 3-4 color decks that are not vulnerable to Wasteland at all. And yeah, we don't really want the format to devolve into like 4 color good stuff decks. That's one of the reasons that Deathrite Shaman had to get banned, and I think it's one of the reasons that like Astrolabe is a problem now. Wasteland is supposed to be one of those cards that helps to keep things from getting too far out of control. If you want to play 3 or 4 colors, you're supposed to be vulnerable to Wasteland in order to do that. That's the trade-off. Decks like Death and Taxes and Goblins are supposed to be there to be able to like Wasteland you out of the game if you decide that you want to get greedy and play all of the best 3-4 color card combinations. But unfortunately, not only does like Plague Engineer now exist that like nerfs those decks, but now Astrolabe just makes Wasteland look like a joke against half of those decks. So I don't. That doesn't seem like that's a good idea to me. And the other thing is that Veil of Summer, like that card is just super dumb against Force of Will. Force of Will is supposed to be one of the cards that keeps like combo decks from getting out of control, but we've seen decks like Show and Tell. Now they don't even, instead of playing Sneak Attack, now they'll just play like Eureka instead, so they can play green to main deck Veil of Summer. Again, the Epic Storm has now dropped all their discard spells in order to play Veil of Summer. Veil is just such a terrible card, like in a format that needs to be kept in check by Force, because any deck that's going to be playing like this sort of like fast mana nonsense, you need Force for that. Like, I don't know. I can't understand why it is that they thought that, Veil was going to be a good idea. Autumn's Veil was already very close to like being good enough by itself. If you really wanted to, have that sort of effect in a card, that's fine. But I think the most egregious part of Veil and Astrolabe is not only do they undermine like the police cards of the format, they say draw a fucking card on them. So you get blown out by it, and the person using them don't even have to lose a card in order to turn off your answers. That's not okay. Like that's just more of that snowball design where it's like, okay, well, now you can't use like your Forest or your Wasteland, and I'm not losing anything for it. So you're going down, and I'm going far ahead of you. That's not fun. That's not good design. That's not going to encourage the nice back and forth interactive games that people enjoy. I don't understand it. I don't pretend to understand it. I think I've made it abundantly clear that I don't like basically anything that happened in the last year at Magic. I think part of the problem is that every time that we see an announcement like this where, we take an inch back from all the degenerate nonsense, we just add another 3 feet of garbage on top of it. So it's like for every step forward, we're going to take 5 steps backwards, and then we never end up coming out ahead in the end. So I don't even know how many cards you would have to ban at this point in order to make Magic fun again. Basically, it's and I hate that I say something like that because I really like this game a lot, but it just seems clear the design philosophy over the last year has just it's been abysmal. It has definitely damaged the game, and I think it's done it in a way where, in my opinion, last year it was worse than Combo Winter, because at least Combo Winter had an end to it. I don't know if this is ever going to have an end to it. The fact that like stuff like Teferi and Plague Engineer, and all the other nonsense cards like Karn and Narset and um, well, even stuff like Field and Oko and Veil, like they're not, and they're gonna still exist in like some of these formats, and it's gonna take like a really long time, and if ever, to get rid of these cards and to restore back what we've lost. But stuff like Teferi, it's probably not even gonna get banned in anything, and that's what makes it worse, because it's going to perpetually be there forever, and it's just the 2019 design has now permanently tainted gameplay, because those cards are not going to get banned, and now we just have to live with them. And I think that's just really unfortunate. And like I said, every time that we're about to take a step forward, we get a set that gives us stuff like Underworld Breach, which it's like, okay, well, this is the next card, like Veil of Summer and Oko, that are just going to end up getting banned in every format. So I don't know how much more goodwill you have left with your players when every single set that you release is just massively shaking up every single format because of the new redonkulous cards that you're printing in them. Like stuff like Modern and Legacy, and now like Pioneer. They're supposed to just be incrementally changed by standard sets, and if you're going to add cards that are going to be relevant to them, they should be like more interactive kind of cards, because that's what these formats need. They need more cards that like create that back and forth gameplay, not the snowball gameplay. So I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about it. I mean, I've ranted now for like almost an hour about this, and I still have to record a league for you guys, and I'm going to be doing that, so it probably won't come out until Tuesday. So I felt like this was a good indication of kind of where Wizards of the Coast is at, and I think that it was worth talking about this. So yeah, it's just like I said, this is sort like this is a step in the right direction, but every time that we take one of these steps in the right direction, we just take 5 steps backwards, and we're still so far back from the starting line at this point that this is not nearly enough in order to cover the ground that we've lost. So I don't know about you, I'm pretty disappointed with this. I think that we could have done a lot more, and the fact that nothing was done with Pioneer, I think is going to be a slap in the face to a lot of people. So please let me know in the comments how you feel about this. Yeah, I'm curious to know, like, do you think that, first of all, did you care about Brawler Historic, and like, what about like, Modern Legacy? Do you think that more should have been done here, or do you think Pioneer is fine, or do you think that stuff needed to happen with Pioneer? I'm curious to know what everybody thinks about this. So, yeah, this was definitely really annoying to me. So, I felt the need that I wanted to talk about it, because I'm not going to do this every time that they do a ban and restricted announcement. Like, I'm not promising that we're going to get one of these each time, but I think the fact that they excluded Pioneer entirely this time, that on its own was definitely worth talking about. So, alright, well, thanks everybody for watching. I will have the league up soon, and I think that it's going to be a Pioneer league. Not because I necessarily want to be playing Pioneer right now, but because I know a lot of you care about watching Pioneer, so we will go and play more of it. So, like I said, thanks everybody. Feel free to like and subscribe if you like these kind of videos. And yeah, if you like these kind of videos where we just have like these discussions instead of just like gameplay and stuff, please let me know, because I can do more stuff like this if this has interest. So in the meantime, like, take it easy everybody, and I will see you again soon.